I should have brought the pizza. It's about food and nutrition. I was gonna order a pizza because I'm starving, but one of my parents didn't show up till like 5 minutes ago. Maybe 10 minutes ago. They were stuck on 290. So after next Wednesday, there's nothing? Next Wednesday, there's nothing?
All right, food and nutrition. There has been, if you will, allow me to call it, an enlarging of Western society in recent years. It's actually gotten much worse since the early 70s. Think of David then and David today. Things really are getting much worse. The way we measure body mass is with something called the body mass index, BMI. Body mass index, well, this is the equation. If you really like it, you can, just like using a calculator, you can use the equation, figure it out. You need to know your weight in pounds, height in inches, 703 is a number. And when you do this, you will get a number, typically between 18 and 35, 40, something like that. The larger the number, the worse it is. This is your body mass index. If you are over 30, you are considered obese. 20-ish, 21, 22, up there, that's considered good and healthy. This doesn't work for kids. This really just works for adults and young adults. Doesn't work so much for old people as well either, but for most people in the middle, this sort of scale works nicely. Now, body mass index. The Center for Disease Control has been tracking this for a large number of years. This is the oldest data I was able to find, about 1985. And in this little plot, the white means there is no data, but light blue means that less than 10% of the population in these particular states have BMI of over 30. So that means they're not fat. As time goes on, this is going to change. 86, 87, you'll notice that Illinois is now up in the 15 to 19% range. As we hit the 90s, Illinois is now in the 15 to 19% range. We're hitting the 24 to 20% range. And as we move upwards towards today, things are getting really fat. By the time you hit 2007, the whole region in the South is really quite obese. Even the upper Midwest is really getting large. The most recent numbers are that nationwide, 35.7% of people. So that's here. Nationwide, 35.7 are over 30%, 30 BMI. Yeah.
What's the state next to? That's the blue square. Is that Arizona?
Blue. This blue is 15 to 19.
What state is that?
Hmm?
No, what state is that?
Whose data?
What state is that?
Oh, that's Colorado. Colorado or Utah? I get them confused. But
It's
the blue
Colorado.
squares.
Utah's the other one.
Yeah.
Next to it.
So this is the CDC data. As we said,
Yeah.
the BMI is really based on how tall you are, to some extent your age. There are different calculators for different ages, but and how much you weigh. So it's just kind of a gross approximation. Problem with BMI is that if you happen to be a weightlifter or something, you have virtually no body fat, but lots and lots of muscle, and you still weigh a lot. And so it gives you a skewed value. But for most people, this probably is true. Over the last number of years, the body mass index has been significantly increasing. Now, food value is measured in what we call calories. Actually, in terms of real energetics, they're kilocalories, so thousands of calories. But they just call them calories because calling them kilocalories would be too depressing. You eat that chip, and that's worth 2 calories. That's one thing, but if you were told it was 2,000 calories, that would be depressing, right? Okay. The amount of the number of calories that people need can be estimated using the basal metabolic rate. Now, basal metabolic rate is in fact adjusted for height, weight, and age. The formula for women is something like this. There's a constant, 4.35 times the weight in pounds, 4.7 times the height in inches, and 4.7 times the age in years. So as you get older, the amount of energy that you require actually decreases. For men, here's the formula, decreases more once you get old for males. Basic metabolic rate is how much energy it takes your body, estimate of it, just to live, just to sit there and exist. If you actually do anything, your calorie demand goes up. If you are totally sedentary, you just sit there in the chair and watch TV, you multiply your BMR by 1.2, and depending upon your degree of activity, it can go up to almost twice your basic metabolic rate. An example that I worked through, if you're a 6 foot, 30-year-old male, weighs 175 with moderate activity, your basic metabolic rate is about 1900, and your calorie requirement is about 2900. Now, you know, that's not such bad news. A super value meal somewhere is 1,000 calories, so you can eat 3 of those a day, etc. Now, all this is based on the notion of calories in, calories out. Calories in, calories out, you know, sounds really good. It does. Your body needs a certain amount of energy to run. If you take in more than that, you will store it. If you take in less than that, you will lose weight. That's the calorie in, calorie out. Problem is that there are so many things that affect the calorie in, calorie out concept. The first is simply genetics. There are people that, regardless of what you do, your body's either going to store it or they're not. is just a genetic thing, that's it. We don't quite know why, but it happens. The second is the actual diet that you eat. Foods all have calories assigned to them, but all calories are not equal. And that's what we're going to talk about mostly, is the inequality among calories. And finally, physical activity, as we saw with the BMR slide. If you exercise, if you're very active, your calorie demand can be up to twice what your actual basic basal metabolic rate is. So, the question, let's go back to the concept of diet. What in the world should you eat? There are diets everywhere, and everyone that you talk to is an expert in something. Low carbohydrate diets are actually getting to be more and more the trend. Atkins came up with his in the early 70s, and basically his thesis was that you could eat all the protein and fat you wanted to, as long as you ate no carbohydrate. All of these are pretty much knockoffs of that. However, Atkins really doesn't get the credit for this. There was a book that he copied that came out a few years earlier. We'll see that in a minute. And actually, the very first low carbohydrate diet came out in 1796. This guy, William Banting, on Letter on Copulence, published in 1796. Copulence is the state of being fat. And what he said, basically, in a nutshell, was that if you want to avoid being fat, eat fat and protein, no grain. Okay. We'll talk about why that makes sense later. There are also trendy diets. Mediterranean diet. Mediterranean diet kind of came about based on the fact that everyone thinks of people from the Mediterranean as being lean, fit, handsome, cute, whatever. The diet is very rich in oils. It's got lots of bread, lots of pasta, fish, not much meat in the way of beef and stuff like that, but lots of protein in terms of fish and whatever. Liver cleansing diet. Love your liver and live longer. Okay, lots of very trendy things. There are religious-based diets, creationist, etc. And finally, there are diets for the self-indulgent. The ice cream diet.
Is there such a thing?
Drink beer and get thin. The Grady diet. The martini diet. And this is the drinking man's diet. This is the book that Atkins basically copied.
The drinking man?
The drinking man's diet. Now, how does it differ from Atkins? Drinking man's diet said the same thing. It said, eat all the fat you want, eat all the protein you want, no carbohydrate. And you can drink as much of anything as you want.
Or it's not just drinking?
That's my favorite diet. But, and we'll talk about why that's actually sound. There are also people that suggest that you should just forget about the whole thing, and real women don't diet, etc., etc. But you know, you kind of have to keep a mind set about what you eat, why you eat it, and how it's going to affect you. Obviously, over the last 25 years, 35 years, whatever, things have changed a lot. People are putting on pounds like mad. Well, From a biochemical standpoint, when you eat food, things happen to it. It hits your stomach, and it's going to be metabolized by three basic pathways. Glycolysis. Glycolysis takes sugars and starches. It converts these, there are 6 carbon units, it converts them into 3 carbon units, and gives rise to energy. Glycolysis is perhaps the basic metabolic pathway. It's the most fundamental, it's the oldest. Your brain only does glycolysis. Tumor cells only do glycolysis. It's a very, very fundamental process. Beta oxidation of fatty acids. When you have fat, the fat is actually a fabulous energy source. The process is beta oxidation. Again, it clips the fat into 2 carbon units. 2 carbon units can then be converted into lots and lots of energetic things. And finally, protein catabolism. You eat a protein. When the protein hits your stomach, it's converted to amino acids, and then they are metabolized separately. So these are the 3 basic pathways we're going to talk about. Glycolysis. This is glucose. This is a 6-membered ring with an oxygen in it. The little wedgies, if you recall, if it's coming out like this, it means it's coming towards you. The dashed wedgie is going in. So this defines the stereochemistry of glucose. Glucose is your basic sugar. When you eat starch, so bread, whole grain, anything, you eat any starch, that's basically just a polymer of glucose. As soon as that stuff hits your stomach, it's converted into glucose. Glucose. This is NAD+. It's a nicotine adenine dinucleotide, is what it stands for. This is a low energy molecule metabolically. ADP, adenosine diphosphate, again low energy. During the process of glycolysis, these are converted into NADH and ATP. NADH and ATP are the things that run the body. Every time your muscle moves, it burns a scad of ATP. That's how muscles move. So this is the process. We start off with a 6 carbon unit, and we're going to break it into 2 3 carbon units. The pathway looks like this. We're not really responsible for all this, but it's kind of cute. You start off with glucose. You're going to put a phosphate on one of the OH groups. Then we're going to split the bond here, convert this to a 5-membered ring. That's a fructose. PFK takes this and phosphorylates it. So we have 2 phosphates now. Then we're going to take this molecule and split it into 2 3-carbon chunks. 3 carbon chunks are both isomerized, so they turn out to be the same. The phosphate group is moved from here to here. So you get it up here, makes a double bond. Finally, you wind up with pyruvic acid, a 3-carbon unit. Along the way, we're going to make, like I said, 2 ATPs and 2 NADHs. So it's a very fundamental, very simple process chemically. And it yields energy all along the way. Once you make pyruvate, pyruvate is then moved into the mitochondria. Cells contain mitochondria. Now, if you look at a mitochondria on an electron microscope, it looks like a little bacteria living inside of your cell. And actually, the thought is that it used to be, that these were bacteria that are inside of these cells. And it was a symbiotic relationship because these bacteria could take these metabolites and convert them into more energy. So the bacteria lost their properties of being a bacterium and just kind of stayed as this little organelle, the mitochondria. So you take pyruvate, you're going to move it in, and as you do, the CO2 up here that's attached goes away. We're going to make lots of NADH, which winds up as lots of ATP. And we connect it to something called coenzyme A to get our favorite biological intermediate. And this is acetyl CoA. This is the universal intermediate in all of metabolism. Starting with acetyl CoA, you can make anything. You can go back and make sugars, you can make fats, you can make protein. It's the ultimate end for metabolism. Here, you just go forward. So let's think about our bread basket. Everybody loves bread. You know, you take bread, you rub butter on it, you dip it in oil and cheese and stuff like that. What happens? Well, realistically, even though it looks like bread, this is nothing but sugar. And as soon as you eat this, it turns into sugar. As soon as it hits your stomach, the whiter the bread, the faster it turns into sugar. Whole grain does it more slowly, but it still does it. All right, when you get all this sugar in your stomach, it goes very quickly into your bloodstream, and your blood sugar goes up. Now, your body regulates blood sugar very, very carefully. Because if you have too much, it makes you nuts. If you don't have enough, it makes you nuts. It's got to be right at the right spot. The way it does that is with insulin. Insulin will regulate how much sugar there is in your blood. If there's not enough, it will stimulate metabolism to make more. If there's too much, it will take it and convert it into something else. What does it convert it into? Let's say that we, the first thing it converts it to is called glycogen. Glycogen is the living person's version of starch. We have about 200 grams of glycogen stuffed everywhere, and it's used for instant energy, if you will. If you're a runner and you take off running, you've heard the expression, hit the wall. Frankly, that just means you ran out of glycogen. Glycogen runs through glycolysis and gives you energy. When it's gone, poof, you're in real trouble. So, if you have excess sugar, you will convert it to glycogen. But once your glycogen stores are full, what happens? Well, it's converted into fat. Now this is a fat cell. It's not very attractive. Got the little cell thing here, but all of this is stored fat, triglycerides. Now this is a good thing. Fat can actually go in and out of this cell. So let's say that later on you really got hungry and you didn't eat something. The fat starts coming out. It runs through beta oxidation, which we'll see in a minute, makes acetyl CoA, and you're good. However, if you don't metabolize this, that's what you wind up with. Lots and lots of fat cells. Bad things. The bottom line here is that when you eat excess carbohydrate, not fat, carbohydrate, carbohydrate, all that wonderful bread, is converted to fat. Look at this meal. We have French fries, we have fried something or other here, a hot dog, we have all this good stuff. How to get fat without really trying? Think about it. If you eat the French fries, all the starch goes to sugar. Once you're full of sugar, where does the fat from the French fry and everything else go? Into the adipocyte. All right, what happens to fat? Let's say that we're hungry and we're not eating bread. So what do? Well, the first step is to take the fat out of the adipocyte. Here's our CoA thing again. The fat is converted to what's called an Acetyl CoA. So we have a long carbon chain with the CoA on the end. What the body does is take this, really an alkane chain, and puts in a double bond. It's amazing the way it does that, but it does. Once you have the double bond in there, it can be split, hydrogenated into hydroxyacyl CoA, and then once you get to this point, it's split to give us acetyl CoA. Whatever's left of the chain, that's the acyl CoA, just goes back around and around and around. As you notice, we're making NADH at every turn. Fat is a darn good source of energy. Now, what kind of fat is good? What is good fat? For years and years and years and years and years and years and years, the government and every nutritionist on the planet has condemned saturated fat, haven't they? Saturated fat, oh my gosh, sounds bad just thinking about it. Saturated fat is actually the easiest to metabolize. Your body loves it. It will just chew it up like mad. Unsaturated or polyunsaturated fat also works. As long as all the double bonds in here, wherever they are cis. If it's a trans double bond, your body cannot recognize it, has no clue what to do with it, and just leaves it alone.
Is that like the trans fat?
Trans fat. Trans fat really is bad for you. Polyunsaturates are good. Saturated fats, the kind like in blubber, a good fatty steak, or coconut oil, that's good for you, believe it or not. Protein. What happens when you eat that steak, aside from the fat? Well, protein, as we talked about last chapter, is nothing but polyamino acids. And again, as soon as it hits your stomach begins converting it down into basic amino acids. Now, we need amino acids for lots of things. Protein will basically go into the, quote, amino acid pool. And we'll use that to make other proteins, neurotransmitters, hormones, and whatever. If we don't need excess protein, if we don't need protein for all of these things, then we can do oxidative deamination, take the carbon skeleton. Remember pyruvate? That's what came out at the end of glycolysis. We can go down to pyruvate, and finally back to our friend acetyl CoA. Acetyl CoA really links all of these things together. This is the CoA part, the big ugly molecule. Can't imagine quite how it got this job of doing all this stuff. But the little 2 carbon units, or the fatty acid units that it carries, are the thing that provide basically the metabolic energy. So, bottom line here. Sugars go to acetyl CoA. Fats go to acetyl CoA, and protein can too. However, these processes happen at different rates. Glycolysis, conversion of sugars, that's really fast. The body is darn good at that. Beta oxidation, converting fats into energy is a slower process, much slower. And finally, protein. Protein, even though it has the same calorie content as simple sugars, is a very, very slow process. Why does a drinking man's diet work? Because alcohol, even though it's metabolized very quickly, because your body recognizes it as a toxin, the pathway, metabolic pathway to going from alcohol to acetyl CoA is just incredibly inefficient. You're much more likely just to get warm when you drink than to get fat.
Get warm?
Warm. Literally warm. That's because there's a microsomal oxidase that will take excess alcohol and essentially just convert it to heat. All right, so all of these things happen, but they happen at different rates. Well, as early as, well, the 30s, the government, in its wisdom, USDA, realized that people were eating diets that were not, quote, balanced. And so they decided that it was their job to step in and tell people what they should eat. So, the very first dietary recommendation from the USDA looked like this. The food groups. Group 1 here. Vegetables. Tomatoes, vegetables and stuff like that. Potatoes, milk, meat, breads, butter, etc. There were 7 of them. And the basic recommendation was that every day you should eat something from every group. That would make you a better person. Well, there are 7 groups here, and that's way too many for a government, I suppose. And so a couple of years later, they changed this and came up with the basic 4. All right, 7's too many. So just make sure you eat meat, dairy, grains, and fruits and vegetables. That's good. You do that, you'll be fine. You'll be good. And so this was their recommendation. However, in the 50s, Dwight Eisenhower, general from World War II, was elected president. Eisenhower was very, very popular, but he had a very bad heart. He had a heart attack in office in the 50s, and everybody was afraid, oh my gosh, well, okay. So they put him in the hospital, they looked at his arteries, and they found that they were clogged with fat and cholesterol. Now, the folks at the time said, well, obviously, he's eating too much fat, and his food has cholesterol in it. So they said, no fat and nothing containing cholesterol. Well, Eisenhower wasn't happy. In fact, he hated his diet, and my gosh, he died anyway. But that recommendation set the entire nation and then the world on the low-fat diet craze. that moment on, fat was vilified. Cholesterol was even worse. Now, cholesterol really got a bad shake here because we all have circulating cholesterol, but your body makes 70 to 80% of it. It makes it because it needs it. So it makes it from scratch from acetyl CoA. It makes it. The cholesterol you eat does almost nothing to your total cholesterol. Nonetheless, we're on a low-fat diet. Well, okay, so the USDA said, gosh, we can't tell people to eat the 4 groups anymore because they have fat in them. So they came out with the infamous pyramid. Now this was the first food pyramid. You're supposed to eat lots of stuff that's on the bottom and not much on the top. So bread, cereal, rice, pasta, yeah, go ahead, stuff yourself. Fruits and vegetables, okay. 2 or 3 servings, little servings of veal, not even, they didn't even call it beef, veal. A little bit of dairy, and oils and stuff way at the top. Now this was done with essentially no scientific guidance at all. And immediately, everybody was unhappy. The dairy industry and the beef industry said, oh my goodness, what do you mean? You're telling people not to eat our stuff? So virtually everybody started coming out with their own version of the pyramid. Here's the vegetarian. Again, lots of grains, fruits and vegetables, no meat obviously. Only real protein you get, a little bit of eggs, a little bit of nuts. Mediterranean, again, lots of wine, lots of oil, lots of pasta, bread, some fish. Once a month you're allowed to eat some meat.
So everywhere there's somebody that has a different.
Everyone had their own. Asian diet, again, almost no meat, lots and lots of noodles, more vegetables, a little bit of oil. Once a week you get eggs, shellfish, whatever. Latin American looks a lot like the Asian actually. Lots of this, lots of vegetables,
That's
only weekly stuff. Mayo Clinic came out and they actually did something that was a bit better. They pushed fruits and vegetables to the very bottom, moved carbohydrate up from the bottom, and moved protein and fat down from the top. So this is probably the best of all the ones that we've seen. This, however, is a college student diet. Ramen noodles, beer, pizza, fast food, and fruits and vegetables. Are you kidding me? So, you know, this controversy went on for years. And USDA stuck to its guns and said, nope, we're right, everybody's wrong. Finally, they gave in and said, well, okay, maybe we're not right. And so they came out with a new pyramid. The new pyramid, however, had no food groups at all. No food groups. It just had this thing. Now, what they did was put a little icon on the side with a guy running up the stairs that was supposed to remind you that you need to exercise too. Well, everybody looked at this and said, you gotta be kidding me, this is really stupid now. So they finally filled in food groups at the bottom, but the food groups they have added were virtually identical to what they had before. Lots and lots of grains, little tiny bits of meat and dairy. Well, This, again, just caused lots of problems. People at USDA said, oh my gosh, what should we do? So they said, okay, fine, we're not going to do pyramids at all anymore. We're done with pyramids. So they came out with the plate.
Oh, yeah, that's what we teach.
That's the plate. The plate has fruits, grains, vegetables, and protein, and of course a little bit of dairy. Does this remind you of something we saw in 1950? Kind of like full circle here. All right, so, you know, you can't really listen to the guidelines because, number one, nobody can quite agree, and number two, they were all written, literally, all written with no scientific basis.
Someone just said, let's write this.
So, what are you supposed to eat? Let's look at a couple choices here. Which of these two would be better for you? We're talking a bag of chips
That's me.
or a big fat greasy ribeye, rare.
Yeah.
Well, when you eat the chips, what happens? Carbohydrate got to be metabolized very rapidly. So those are instant calories. They're going to go and they're going to satisfy whatever needs you have. They're fried, however, in fat. So if you have enough carbohydrate generating your energy, what happens to the fat? Well, it just goes to storage. The real combination, the real problem with Western diet now is the combination of fat and carbohydrate. You metabolize the carbohydrate and store the fat. Yeah.
If fat is also energy, correct? Source of energy, correct?
Right, it's a great source of energy.
So as a
But you're not going to use the fat as long as there's carbohydrate around. As long as you still have carbohydrate, the fat just gets stored.
so instead of like, say you're gonna go work out, right? And you have yourself a meal 4 hours before the workout. You have
Okay.
yourself your protein, your steak, your potatoes, this, that, and that. Right before you work out, is it okay to eat a candy bar?
Oh yeah,
What is it?
absolutely,
Is it-
because that gives you instant energy. Yes, it does.
And it'll burn the carbs.
And if you're a runner, before a marathon, you eat lots of pasta. Why do you do that? To make sure your glycogen is full. You gotta make sure the glycogen reserves are full.
Little utensils for me.
But, again, if you eat carbohydrate and fat, you get fat. The steak, on the other hand, protein and fat. Fat will be metabolized before protein. Protein is metabolized slowly. So when you eat a greasy steak, you metabolize that fat and you run on it. It's converted to acetyl CoA, the sugars, and everything that you need. Protein you use for whatever you need for protein, and it very, very slowly would be converted to acetyl CoA and storage. The bottom line, fat does not make you fat. Fat plus carbohydrate makes you fat.
Your mouth is.
All right, here's the meal. Let's look at this and say what in the world is right with this and what's wrong with it. Ooh, yes, you're right, it does look good. Step one, we've got French fries. French fries. Again, the carbohydrate goes straight to sugar. The fat goes to your hips. Number two, we have a drink here. That's just sugar water. It is metabolized until you're full of sugar, and the rest goes to your hips. Our burger here. The problem with this burger, it's a triple bun, so you have all of that nice bread. Again, that's metabolized first, and the excess goes to your hips. The one thing here that's good that most people are surprised about, look at your fried chicken. Protein and fat. That's pretty good for you, actually. A little bit of breading, but protein and fat, that's good stuff. If you eat this without the rest, that's pretty good. You'll metabolize the fat, metabolize the protein, and there's really not much left over to store. Here's my favorite meal. Now you gotta admit that looks good. What's right about this thing? Well, we have here broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. Chemically, this family of vegetables contains what are known as isothiocyanates. Isothiocyanates inhibit an enzyme in your liver called P450. P450 is a general oxidase, but if you happen to eat something that has carcinogenic potential, P450 can actually activate it and make it a carcinogen. The isothiocyanates inhibit P450 and block that from happening. Here we have cheese, butter, eggs, avocados. Avocados are wonderful. Lots of fat. Those are good things for you. Colorful fruits and vegetables. The rule to remember is the brighter the color on your fruits and vegetables, the better they are. Good, rich blueberries, great. That's because they're full of a chemical called a flavonoid. Flavonoid causes color in things, and it's a remarkable antioxidant. Remarkable. More colorful fruits and vegetables you have, more flavonoids, less you have to worry about free radical oxidation. Garlic. Garlic is also an interesting thing. It contains sulfur compounds, that's why it stinks. But these are very good at inhibiting various stages of tumorigenesis. So it's a very anti-carcinogen vegetable. And of course we have fish, we have meat, we have chicken, all of that, that's all very good stuff. So this is a pretty good meal actually. Olive oil, olives themselves are also wonderful things. Good rare meat, yep, the rarer the better. With red meat, the problem, one of the reasons people say that you shouldn't eat red meat is the process of cooking. When you cook red meat, the chemical reaction happens on the surface, produces compounds that taste fabulous. You know, this is the why you want to grill something. But they're actually really bad for you.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. So if you have your meat kind of beige on the outside, that's best for you, but it tastes terrible. The longer you cook it, the more of this stuff accumulates inside the meat. So if you cook it, leave it nice and rare, it's actually pretty good. All right, again, here's our quiz. We have this incredible burger and we have donuts. Which is going to make you fat? Well, I think we all know the answer now, I hope. Donuts are nothing but fried dough, right? Covered with sugar. The dough and the sugar go straight to sugars in the blood. Where does the fat go? We all know that. This guy, an incredible looking burger, it's just got 2 pieces of bread that will kill you, and got a huge amount of meat, cheese, and look at the vegetables. You know, it's got tomatoes, red onions, etc. This is actually not a bad meal. You could never manage to get it in your mouth, but it would actually not be a bad meal metabolically. All right, here's my favorite question. Here we have Coke, and we have our 2 martini lunch. Once again, Coke is nothing but sugar water. Excess sugar goes to fat. The martinis, however, the drinking man's diet, very slowly, very inefficiently metabolized. They will almost never wind up as fat. All right, the bottom line. This is your ideal meal. The whole notion of diet, as was devised in the 50s, was based literally on bad science. And they have been pushing carbohydrate on people, fat and carbohydrate, for years. When they changed from sugar drinks to high fructose corn syrup drinks, it's even worse. The reason for that is that high fructose corn syrup contains fructose, obviously. Why do they do that? Because fructose is sweeter than sugar, sweeter than sucrose. So they need less of it. So it was a plain economy of scale. Problem is that when your body takes in fructose, your body is tuned to react to glucose, not fructose. And so the fructose goes in your bloodstream. Insulin knows nothing about fructose, just glucose. So the fructose is there. What does your body do with it? The liver takes it and converts it all to fat. Yep, it's a shame. Our meal here, our fish, our red meat, fried foods, lots of colorful vegetables, and a couple martinis. The USDA is finally in the process of revising their guidelines. They were due out a long time ago, but they're all fighting with each other. Now, these aren't the USDA scientists that are fighting. These are the politicians and the lobbies for the food groups. You know, Lay's potato chips, by gosh, they have lots of money. And they don't want people to be told not to eat potato chips, etc. They have announced that they are finally moving carbohydrate from the bottom of their pyramid and moving it up. And they're putting protein down on the bottom. But the notion of exactly what it's going to look like is still under intense negotiation with all the food companies and stuff like that.
So it's all about the money,
It's all about money. Yes, it is, absolutely.
like everything else.
Yeah, you can figure that one out. The thing that you guys need to remember
You're gonna die anyway.
is just think about the chemistry involved. You know, everything will be eventually converted to acetyl CoA. But it does it at different rates. The faster it's converted, that means that's what you're going to be living on. And anything else that's left over is going to be stored. All right. Our exam is next Wednesday. Remember, on Monday, we will do a sample exam number 3. We have chapter 11, 12, and 16. So material will be radioactivity, earth science, which is very descriptive, and food science, which again is very descriptive. So it'll be a non-quantitative sort of thing. Make sure you do the tutorial on radioactivity. That's only worth 5 points or so, but still it's better than nothing.
You can
And
say.
again, hand in your sample exam, that'll give you 5 more. Any questions? Yeah?